Welcome back to Why Blank Lost for Survivor 45. I'm David Bloomberg, and even though that tribal council happened a couple days ago as we're recording this, I am still reeling from it.
It was amazing.
Yes. Joining me, of course, is my co-host on this roller coaster ride, Jessica Lewis.
I am here and very excited to talk about that crazy tribal council as well. What just a moment and a moment that we will remember. And I love that about Survivor, that there are those moments in history that I think somebody might have tweeted that this was like the Mount Rushmore. It's one of those Mount Rushmore type of moments. And I can appreciate that because I think it definitely will be.
Yeah. I mean, watching it, it had its ups and downs at the same time. Like, I was so happy for Kaleb, but then Jay is just sitting there, like,
Oh, I know,
I felt so
crushed.
bad for her.
Yeah. But there is a lot to discuss there. There's a lot to pick apart. I don't know if we want to just jump right into that or do some other stuff before we start talking about that crazy tribal
Yeah,
council.
even though Jay was the second choice to get voted out rather than the first, we'll still follow our usual path, comparing her game to my rules for winning. I originally wrote way back after season 1 and have been updating ever since, using all the non-spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. The newest version of the rules can be found on our website by going to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed and click on the link that coincidentally says Survivor Rules.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But yes, before we get to that, like you said, we always have some things to discuss. And we can start with our weekly update of the Bruce Couture War.
I love that this is where you want to start. This is amazing.
It was interesting how when Couture was looking for an idol without the others, that was bad.
Yes.
But when the others were looking for an idol without Couture, that was good.
Yes. And do you want to know what I thought was fascinating about this? Is that we have been under the, I think, misguided belief that Katora is in with everyone, and like Bruce was one that was kind of on the outs, because we've seen some people in their exit interview say, oh well, Bruce would have been the first one voted out. But watching that moment, I was like, oh, she is so on the outs, because she's the only one that they're keeping out of this like idol hunt moment. So I'm worried about Katora as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because, yeah, if she is off doing whatever she was doing, she was probably giving a confessional or something on a walk, in quotes.
Right. Or in Coconut Grove.
Yeah. I think that she, if Bruce or someone else says, let's all go hunt for the idol, then no one's going to say, no, let's wait for Couture. They're all going to pretend to be part of that group.
That's fair. I could see that. But it also did feel like it was very exclusionary. Like,
it was exclusionary. But I also think that those same people would have done the same thing if Bruce were gone and Couture said, hey, let's all go.
That's fair as well.
So I think it's just the people in the group were acting that way to keep up their bonds with each other.
Sure.
But I don't know that that's long-term means anything.
Right. I did love Jake in that moment. I mean, I love Jake, period. He's lovely, and he's my winner pick, and he's going to win. So there's all of that. But he was quite entertaining during that moment, looking for his ring that
lost
he
the
lost.
Ring. Yes. And of course,
very convincing.
Yes, Bruce found the idol, but now I suspect almost everybody's going to know about it very shortly.
Yeah. So Jake definitely knows about it. And then were other people present when he actually found it?
I mean, they have to figure that he had it because he didn't lose his vote, and so.
Oh, and that's true. That is true.
Yeah. And Kaleb specifically said to the Reba people, Bruce has an idol.
Right, but wait, no, we have to back up for a minute, because there was one thing that was explained on Fire,
yes,
Jeff Probst's podcast, about the small print at the bottom. So he wouldn't have not had a vote because Oh wait, no, because they hadn't merged yet, so he still
Right.
would have lost the vote because they would have had to. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I'm adding things that are not in that small print. Thought I had
um
it all figured out.
yeah, so I think that they all must have figured that he found it, all but Katura, of
Sure.
course. So and then like I said, Kaleb spread it to Reba, and they're gonna spread it around because they're honest about
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Right.
uh
Of course.
so so yeah, now beyond that, once we get to Mergatory, Bruce's urge to control everything really came out, even as he said he was trying not to. As
Mm-hmm.
different people talked about him, Katura just tweeted, "Vindicated" in all caps.
I really want to know what their relationship is like now.
I don't think it's good. I mean, so someone said that she had put out a TikTok about Bruce, but by the
Oh.
time I got to TikTok, it was gone. So it's it's possible that
Interesting.
she may have said a little too much or had second thoughts about it. So I don't know exactly what
Interesting.
was there. And I'm just going by what someone said. So if I'm wrong, sorry. But, you know, in any case, hopefully they get along fine now. And
Mm-hmm.
she's just playing it up.
Right.
Um, Meanwhile, back on the show though, she was giving him some great straight-faced sarcasm as she talked about his
Oh yes.
leadership skills, just looking straight at, well, maybe you can get everyone together with your leadership skills.
She is amazing at like doling out the truth, but in a way that like she's not being truthful. Like when she was
Mm-hmm.
talking to Jake about being a lawyer. So like, what's it like to be a
Yeah.
lawyer?
Yeah.
Like it's just so great because she's just leaning in on this stuff
Mm-hmm.
heavy. And I love it so much. I am very curious though to see at what point is this going to come to a head because it has been building and I feel
Oh
like it's
yeah.
been building so much that one of them is making it to the final three, and then the other one's going to be on the jury going, "God darn it!" Yes, yeah, that's what it feels like at this point because I don't know. It's just it's in every episode. There's something that comes up about
Mm-hmm.
it. We keep being reminded about Bruce from not just Katora but other players as well. It just seems to be like a theme.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And
Mm.
the interesting thing for me about this episode was I think Bruce's blunt way of handling things actually helped push the vote in the direction of Kaleb.
Oh, I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. He was the only one that was like, "Hey guys, what about this?" And I
Yeah.
actually did feel like Caleb's approach, and I know we're going to be talking about this, and I'm
Mhm.
not trying to jump the gun or anything, but Caleb's approach coming into the mergatory moment
Oh
when he
yeah.
was
We won't be talking about Kaleb much. So yeah, that now
no,
is the
we won't.
appropriate
So
time.
I'll
Yeah.
talk about it now. But like he was literally talking to everyone. And I thought, ooh, this is
Mhm.
not necessarily a good place for him to be because he's kind of spreading the wealth too much, trying to
Yes.
make inroads with everyone and sharing information with everyone. Like, oh, well, this person told me this and that person told me that. And then, oh, over here, they told me this.
Mhm.
And people are going to start comparing notes. And it was fascinating that the only person who said, hold up, do you see what's going on over here? Was Bruce. Bruce was the only one that was like, I'm not talking to this guy. He's talking to everyone. Do you see what he's sprinkling around?
Mhm.
I was fascinated that he was the only one that we really saw calling a spade, right?
Yeah.
We're like, this is what's happening. Does anyone else see this?
Yeah. I mean, he was definitely not wrong in identifying the issue. I
Mm-hmm.
say he was wrong in the way he handled it in certain cases.
Yes.
Like he just told Katura, "We're voting Kaleb," and she's like,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm not," and he's like, "We're voting Kaleb," you know.
And she's like,
And
no.
yeah, I mean, she ended up, so he won in that regard. But
Right.
it's it's you need to bring people in, make them feel included, like they actually have a say. And he did not do that. He was,
Well,
I
but
guess,
I
using his leadership skills.
true, but I also think that and this is something we've talked about.
Hmm.
When you haven't gone to tribal council, you don't really know how it works.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what's been happening. You've got Kaleb, who's been to how many tribal councils at this point?
Now this was his fourth. Yeah, fourth.
He's very well seasoned at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know what it feels like, when you know what you have to go through, when you know how to kind of work the room the way that he does,
Mm-hmm.
there's a different moment for you when you're walking into that space. Whereas people who haven't gone to tribal council and haven't had to scramble and haven't had to like throw a name out there might not know the nuances of it yet. And
Right.
sometimes you can just walk into the game and know that that's what you have to do and understand it. And I feel like Kaleb is probably more apt at doing something
Mm-hmm.
like that because he's a little more social. But this is who Bruce is. Bruce is like the dad, the uncle, like, I'm just going to take care of it. Just
Mm-hmm.
believe me. And that's it. And I don't need to tell you why. I don't need to explain to you how. This is what we're doing. And that's it. And unfortunately, that doesn't always jive when you are playing a game like
Yeah.
this. But in this particular instance, he was right. It's just the presentation wasn't necessarily the best.
I mean, he was right. Possibly. I mean, there were many different ways you could go about this first vote. He was right
Oh,
in
for
one of the
sure.
ways. Yes. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. At this stage of the game, you put out a name, people may well be willing to go along with it, and they were. It
Mhm.
will just be a question of how long that lasts with him. And my guess is not very. I don't think
Yeah.
that's going to be a very successful way of continuing to handle it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think that people will appreciate that type
Yeah.
of presentation, but this is something else that we've talked about when you are at this point in the game.
Mm-hmm.
It really is a matter of who can we all just agree upon?
Yes.
Like the
Oh,
common
yeah.
enemy, that was something that someone talked about. Like you're looking for that common enemy, and it's
Mm-hmm.
someone that everyone can go like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this particular moment, it made sense for Bruce to go, look at that guy over
Right.
there. That
Right.
one. So like, can we
Yeah.
all get behind that? So I certainly don't fault him for shining a light on Kaleb, even though Kaleb was really like, "Look at me,"
Yeah.
the
He
entire
was
time.
already in the spotlight.
He
Yes.
really was, and he was like, "I'm
Bruce was
gonna
like, "Do you see
stand
where
right
that light
here."
is aimed? It's already there." Yeah, it's funny because in a way, Kaleb and Bruce are two sides of a coin. Kaleb was talking
Mm,
to everyone. Bruce didn't want to talk to anyone outside his
right.
core group. And really, the correct path is somewhere in the
In the
middle.
middle.
Yeah.
Right. Mhm. Yeah.
Now, as for some of the other players, Emily's position with Austin and Drew and the rest of Reba created an interesting situation because telling Emily about the Kaleb plan was a huge risk. But
Mhm.
they also couldn't claim to be playing honestly with her as they have been if they didn't tell her. And
Yeah.
similarly, even though she has played with so much honesty, it feels like she may have either hidden her close relationship with Kaleb or just somehow convinced them that, nah, I've thrown him aside. I'm with you now.
Yeah, I am very curious about how she was able to spin that, and I think to her credit, she has done a good job of kind of balancing herself and how
Mm-hmm.
she's supposed to present herself to new individuals. But also, there's no one left from Lulu, right? So
Yeah.
it's like it's her and Kaleb. So
Mm-hmm.
no one is going to throw them under the bus. No one is going to say, hey, you know what? Emily and Caleb really are like
Right.
this close because Caleb and Emily can sell it completely differently. Like, well, we're just kind of stuck with each other because we were the
Yeah.
last two on Lulu. So that I think is a benefit for them to keep the like the kind of like the
Mm-hmm.
cloak and dagger of the relationship that they've actually created because no one's left to throw them under the bus.
Right. Right. And so, of course, Emily tells Kaleb what's going on. And, then Kaleb went into, I was going to say fight or flight mode, but it was just fight mode.
Mm,
And he revealed, as we mentioned earlier, Bruce's idol as an attempt to sway people, which, yeah, throw out anything you can. I
right,
just didn't think at the moment, and I was right, that it was enough because, okay, you give this information to Reba. Great. Now they know the
right,
information and you're of no further use to them.
right.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the end of it.
Hmm.
Okay. It's like,
They have everything they
congratulations.
need,
Yeah.
and we can get rid of a very, threatening player.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Um, Now, one more thing I wanted to mention was something that I had seen discussed on social media and also by Christian on Know It Alls, which was that Emily tends to count the votes and might have noticed one missing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't occur to me in the moment, Wednesday night, but then later I remembered we have heard that Austin and Drew shared pretty much all the information with Emily about all their trinkets. So I think she probably knew he had to sacrifice a vote.
Probably. I would agree with that because she didn't nobody seemed to even like bat an eye that
I
they,
mean,
like, wait,
yeah, you're not
we
going
seem to
to
be
in
missing
that,
one.
yeah, in that moment anyway. But,
Right.
like last time it happened, she brought it up, as soon as they got back from tribal council.
Right.
I
Right.
don't think she's going to do that. We're not going to see her bring it up like she did with Sabias.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
So, is there anything else you wanted to discuss before we move on to our next segment?
I do want to discuss one component, and that
Mhm.
is the earn the merge, like, whatever it's called, that thing that they do.
The thing that they do, the mergatory feast, the
No,
just the battle, the
the the
challenge,
the
the
challenge. Thank you. I'm
okay.
sorry. It has been a very long week. I'm very
Yeah.
tired, not feeling well. But so, like, that particular challenge, I feel like it's. I understand it's drawing rocks, which
Mhm.
we all know how much I love that. But
Mhm.
like,
They even did a
it's
slow-mo of it for you of
they
like
did. It
Austin
was
sticking his hand in and pulling it
so
out.
nice. It was so nice. But like, the division obviously ended up very unfair, right? We had more strength on one side than
Mhm.
the other, and that was a very, very, very physical challenge.
Yes.
So I feel like maybe there should be some more consideration regarding that particular moment and when they're going to be dividing the tribes up for such a challenge, because that is certainly an issue,
So
right?
you want
When
more
that's
puzzles at the end?
No, I don't want more
I
puzzles.
know.
I'm thinking less strength type thing at that particular point in the game. If you're going
Mhm.
to make a division that way, I just feel like it's something that when it's a chance type of thing, like where you're going to end up. And I understand they feel like, oh, well, you have to earn the merge. Well, that's
Mhm.
fine. Maybe do like a schoolyard pick then. Force them to have to like really like think through this. If you have to earn the merge,
Mhm.
then it's all on you. It's not rocks. We're not doing this random draw. You have to figure it out. So it's a schoolyard pick. And go for it,
Mm.
and then maybe draw rocks for like who's going to be the one doing the picking, because then
Right.
you can only be angry with that schoolyard pick as opposed to the random rock draw.
Interesting. It would certainly add another layer in there.
Mm-hmm.
Of I can't believe I didn't get picked for that team, or I can't
Right.
believe I was the last one and I had to, bet on whichever team instead of it
Yeah.
being random. I
I
like
feel
it.
like that goes more with along with the like earning it component.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it.
All right.
We'll
See, there we
we'll
are.
write to Jeff because after our next segment, I'm sure that he is going to be eager to listen to everything that I say.
Oh
Because
yeah.
it's time for our Jeff Probst is wrong about blank segment. And we
Mm-hmm.
return, unfortunately, to a topic that we discussed earlier in the season because Jeff returned for reasons unknown to that topic. So I was listening to his On Fire podcast, and near the beginning, out of nowhere, he lobbed another unwarranted, unnecessary grenade at Adam Klein about his
Mm,
casting help consulting. And now he
yeah.
didn't name Adam Klein, but everybody knows who he's talking about. And I really don't know what Jeff's problem is that causes him to keep bringing it up in such a pissy way. I mean, is he really so mad that Adam helped Kaleb and others while his own casting people picked two people who quit? I mean, yeah,
Maybe that's what it is.
it's enough pettiness, Jeff. It was just so unnecessary, so childish. It's like, well, I have this podcast and now I'm just going to use it to say mean things here for no reason. It's like, stop it. Just stop it. Grow up.
Yeah. I obviously am very close with Adam, and I
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of respect for what he is trying to do. I know that there has been some contentious things said by other survivors and what Adam is doing, and I'm certainly not going to be in that camp. But I will say that as a survivor player, the amount of messages that I receive from people seeking help with
Mm-hmm.
casting, wanting to know what they can and can't do, wanting to know how things work. And there's a part of me that says, gosh, I really want to help you. And I am willing to help. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it's like, nobody helped my ass when I was trying to get on Survivor. Granted, I was very lucky. I mean, I applied once and I managed to get through and it was lovely. But
It's
what
not
I
luck, it's
understand,
skill. Come on, give
it
yourself
it
credit.
is skill. Well, I said it was lovely, but yes, but but it is like, but to me, I can understand why people are seeking that help because you want that edge. You want to
Mm-hmm.
know what can I do that's going to set me apart. And if someone is willing to do that for you and you are willing to pay that person for their services, well, then that's on that person who's
Yeah.
willing to do that, right? And then it's on the person who's willing to be paid to do it. I have provided guidance and help to some people and I haven't charged them, but I can understand why people would seek the help and why people are willing to provide the help. So if we are going to continue to get people like Kaleb from someone like Adam Klein,
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for it,
Yeah.
Let's do this. I think that's
Yeah,
lovely.
and that was, part of what I mean, what Jeff was saying was implying that they would have gotten Caleb anyway. Well, you don't know that.
Right.
You don't know that. Like he had said before, he had made a comment before, like, well, we knew about Brandon for years because he'd been applying for years. Okay. And he didn't get actually picked for the show until he worked with Adam.
Right. Right.
So does that mean it was finally his time or that he better understood how to present himself? Because, of course, Adam
Mm,
isn't telling anyone to be fake. Adam isn't helping anybody
no.
bluff their way onto the show.
Right.
It's the same as going to someone for help writing a resume or help
Mhm.
doing better in business interviews. It's the same
Mhm.
sort of skills.
Right.
And no one says, oh, there shouldn't be anybody who helps with resumes. People should be able to do it themselves. Not everybody has the same skills in presenting themselves.
Oh, for sure. And I think that the one thing that is very, very, it's like the unknown when you are there, when you're going
Mm-hmm.
through the process. If you don't have thick skin, if you don't have an ability to really like understand yourself and be
Mm-hmm.
willing to sit in a room full of 30 people who are all staring at you, trying to ask you questions and
Mm-hmm.
make you like break down and not be able to respond, and they really want to get under your skin,
Yeah.
you have to be able to do that. And there are people that just don't know what they're doing. And I'll give you a little insight, just a little backstory here. So one of the things that I had learned, and I have no idea if I'm going to get in trouble for sharing, but I'm going to share. When I
You're
was
out of
in that,
contract by now, aren't you?
I have no idea. I don't even
You're
know.
a lawyer. Read the fine print.
Oh, I read that thing for sure. And I'm
I
like,
know.
I'm going to get sued so many times.
Reread the fine print, I guess.
Please
Yeah.
don't sue me.
Yeah.
Well, no, I will say so one of the final parts of the casting process is that moment when you are brought into a very large room and you are surrounded by 30 plus people who are all going to be peppering you with questions, and that's inclusive of Mark and Jeff. And so they're both sitting there asking you questions, and the way that they structure it, it was whoever we like the most is at the end. So like you could tell where you fell like in
Mm-hmm.
their like plan, and we had 18 people that were going through this final process, and I was 17th, and I was like, sweet. Like, okay. Jay from my season was number 18.
Yeah.
So, like, so that's, but when I was standing there waiting to go in, the person who was before me, who was 16th. So just remember that's the
Mm-hmm.
order. So this is someone they've already
Right.
decided we're really into this person,
Mm-hmm.
comes walking out, and he's like, I read them a poem, and he was all excited. And I just remember looking at my casting person and just going, and she just made this face and was like, oh, okay. And he just walked away. I've never seen the guy since. Like, he hasn't been
Ooh.
like
So it
that.
wasn't Stephen Fishback, is what you're
No.
saying in the tone. Okay.
But it's one of those things where you don't know what they're going to be interested in. And this person was clearly someone that they were very interested in. And then he went into that space and presented himself in a way that they were like, never mind.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are the things that can happen. And if you don't know what to really focus on about yourself,
Hmm.
he thought going in there reading them a poem was going to like blow their socks off. And apparently it didn't work. But so this is why seeking some help is not necessarily a terrible idea.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, it's like I said, if Adam had helped Hannah and Sean get on, I could see Jeff being mad.
Sure.
But that's not the situation.
Right.
So redirect
Yeah.
your anger where it should go, Jeff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully Jeff will not bring it up again, so we won't have to bring it up again. And I, of course, have some other thoughts on this episode, but I have or already, already have or will put them on TikToks.
Of course.
I've got the dancing bug. I've got
That was really cute, by the way. I
yes,
liked that a lot.
So, but before we see how Jay did, we do need to mention that the rules that we're about to discuss come in a shorter and much more colorful version in poster form.
Yes,
So go
they
to
do.
robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to that poster and click on it, and then order it,
And
and
buy
then
it.
hang it up. In
That's
addition,
right.
you can keep scrolling and you can click on the shirt, which you can also order.
Mhm.
You probably shouldn't hang that up. You can if you want, but I would advise wearing it. And then you can also scroll down and get the checklist shirt as well.
Love
So
it.
again, this is all at robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed.
So many good things.
Yes. Now, Jay wasn't supposed to get voted out in this tribal council. There wasn't even a split vote against her, but she was always the other name in the mix. Why
Mm-hmm.
were her own original tribe mates thinking about getting rid of her to the point that they volunteered her as a sacrifice? Was it all about Austin's sandwich? Did she have a chance to change it at tribal council? And in what way do I think her situation was similar to Jessica's? It's time to figure out why Jay lost.
Interesting.
Now, to start with, we're going to jump to the 7th rule, which covers idols, advantages, and game mechanics. Because obviously, there was a very key advantage that kind of impacted Jay.
Yeah.
And that was Kaleb's shot in the dark. He was the second player ever to get a safe result, but the first to have it actually save him. And
Yes.
of course, it did so in dramatic fashion by canceling a unanimous 11 votes.
Which we need to talk about that.
Okay. I don't know exactly when we'll talk about that. Let me just say, as he and the others who had just voted for him celebrated, Jay sat there with her head in her hands,
I
knowing what was
know.
likely about to happen. And despite her attempts to counter it, she was right. Now, right after the episode, Jay posted on Twitter the part of her interview with Dalton Ross from the pregame, where she talked about Shot in the Dark and wanted to see it play a bigger role. Oops.
Yeah. Oops. It did. It did. And I have to jump in here just because I do think in this moment, leading up to before Kaleb actually played the shot in the dark, she had indicated in some of her interviews that she was pretty certain he was going to because of how he was acting. He was tossing her name out. He was being very like aggressive about trying to vote her out. And I think in that moment, you really are in like I need to save my ass kind of space, as opposed to I need to make sure I keep loyalty to people who are around me, because you are the backup plan at that point, right? And I know that she talked about this and she's kind of struggled with the fact that she decided not to flip her vote and just like toss another name in there. She stuck with Kaleb. Gosh, I just wish that she had used that moment to say, you know what? I'm the backup plan. And if by some chance he is correct in this, I think she would have had a legitimate reason to provide to the other players. Like, by the way, this is why I flipped. If she even needed to say who actually put a different name down. I just feel like if she's reading the room as well as it sounded like she was reading the room, she should have used it as an opportunity to write down someone else's name other than Kaleb.
See, I'm going to take the other side, much as I
Mm-hmm.
did for someone who drew a rock one time.
I know, and I appreciate that.
So yeah, I figured at the time, before she even did her interviews, I figured that she felt the vote against Kaleb could be more important, especially after his last minute plea. And she did confirm that in interviews. She didn't know how the votes would go. I mean, everyone said they were voting Kaleb, but it was the first time with everyone together. So who knows? And she, as she told Mike Bloom, if this is close, I don't want to regret losing my vote and having the majority not work. So, and there was no way to know. Of course, everybody's saying they're voting Kaleb, but who knows? And what if it's, what if it was going to be 6-5 and she voted the wrong way?
Fair. Mm-hmm. And that's fair. And then she could have ultimately seen herself go home anyway because she flipped.
Plus, there's only a 1 in 6 chance of the shot in the dark succeeding. How many rocks were there with you? Sorry to hit this painful memory.
It's all right. There were 6.
Yeah. So a 1 in 6 chance. And so that means a 5 in 6 chance that it fails and all is fine for her, much again, like for you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so, and then, you could throw in a few extra percentages because although it seemed close to 100% he was going to play it, she couldn't say for sure it was 100%. So if she threw a different vote in there and Kaleb was gone, which, should have been, what did I say? There was a 83% chance or something like that. I don't think I said it yet, but and so if she puts a different vote in there, Kaleb leaves. I know what you're saying about she could have used that argument, but let's face it, she would have voted against someone. They're not going to be happy no matter who you use that argument against.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
And she knew she was already near the bottom. She was going to try to claw her way out. This would be digging her hole deeper. And as she told Mike Bloom, that is just going to cement me to that is just going to further cement me to either the Reba camp or the Bello camp as the person they can rally around to get out at the next tribal council.
And I totally understand that feeling. 100%.
Yes, because that is exactly it. People asked at the time why you didn't just flip instead of going to the rock draw. And the answer was, of course, that you knew if you did, you would survive that tribal council, but you'd be dead in the water as far as your game was concerned. We've been over this on the podcast with you.
Right.
If Jay had written down someone's name and the shot in the dark failed, she would have ended up in a very, very similar position.
And I don't discount that at all. And so I'm glad that you talked through that because it is one of those situations where I feel like for the situation I was in, we were so split and it was so down the middle. And I knew that this half was completely not on my side. I feel like with this group, the divisions weren't as clean and it seemed to be more cohesive and there seemed to be more ability to maneuver as opposed to the situation I was in where it was like, this is it. Like, because we saw what happened with Will when Will wanted to flip, then he went home, so it was like, we were not supporting the flippers. It just wasn't happening. But I feel like this group might have just because it didn't seem to be so like set in stone that like this is what's happening and this is the group and it's this group versus that group. I also think it's interesting that Emily voted for Kaleb because I think if anyone could have been like, yeah, I voted for someone else because Kaleb's with me. But again, I understand why, because you don't want the perception of not being with the group and highlighting yourself. And so it is a lot to consider, but I will say I was impressed to hear her talk through that the way that she did and actually come up with that, because I get the mindset in that moment. You're like, boy, I'm in trouble. Like, this is so bad right now. This is so bad. And so, yes, watching her in that tribal council was painful because you're processing in your own mind all of the pitfalls. But I just don't feel like it was as like drawn in the sand as it was with mine. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it's quite possible that it was.
Yeah, I don't know that it was drawn in the sand so much as it was the first vote at the Mergatory. She
Right.
didn't really know where the sand was.
And that's
Uh,
fair. And she is
she
already the
was in
second
quicksand,
option.
you know?
Yes. And she's the second option
Right,
at that point. So the
right.
last thing you want to do is be like, hey, look at me, because
Hmm.
you've already considered voting me out. Let me give you more of a reason
Right,
to. So I
right.
feel like that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, hey, look at me. He said that thing about me, and then it convinced me to vote for someone else. So now you should all vote for me next time. Uh, so, so yeah. Um, Now, under many circumstances, I would be annoyed that the shot in the dark played such a major role. I think you and I have, a certain reputation. However,
Yes, we do.
you know, in this case, it was the Mergatory. There's already some randomness thrown in
Mm,
when it comes down to who is vulnerable. You talked about that earlier. Who gets the target put on them first? I mean,
right.
because Bruce mentioned his name. There are reasons, but one more fly in the ointment isn't as big a deal as if it were like in a smaller, very strategic planned situation.
Mm.
So, I'm not angry, and plus, let's face it, it was a fun and exciting moment. We have to admit that.
It was, and I do appreciate the fact that you brought up that everyone was celebrating with Caleb and
Yes,
they just all voted for him. And I
yes,
was like, what is happening right now? Like they're
yeah.
all so happy instead of being like mortified that like, oh no, this didn't work.
I mean, I think the thing is, a lot of them were friendly with him, which was
Mm-hmm.
why he got in trouble to begin with. And
Right.
so you're happy to see this guy you like succeed. Uh, but now what are you going to do about it is the real
Well,
question,
he no longer has a shot in the dark.
Yeah,
So there's
yeah,
that.
right. Unless someone
That's
gives
been
it to him,
played.
you can pass it.
Oh,
So,
that's true. That is true. I don't
um,
think anyone's giving Caleb their shot in the
I don't know.
dark.
Emily might, here, do it again.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. She might.
yeah.
Could you imagine if you pulled it off twice?
Oh gosh,
What are the chances of that? All right, someone do the math.
Jeff would be patting himself on the back so hard
And
for
I
inventing
will
the shot.
say, yeah, he had a great poker face. Jeff was like when he opened up that
Hmm.
scroll, there I mean, I explained what happened to my husband because he didn't watch it with me.
Yeah.
And when I explained it to him, he's like, "Oh my god, production must have been drooling for like 6 months
Yeah.
just waiting for this moment." And yeah, Jeff was like nothing. Like I'm
Well,
not even going to give you a little.
it was funny because his co-host on the podcast, not Devin's, the other one, said to him,
Jay? Is it Jay?
I don't know. I just call him his co-host, whatever. It said something like, "How did you keep a straight face in that situation?" Jeff was like, "It's my job." Yeah,
And he is very good
yeah,
at doing that, I
yeah,
will say.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah, he doesn't blow up
yeah.
anything like you would think. Like, wow,
Right.
how has he kept that a secret and not
Yeah,
said anything? It's
yeah.
amazing.
Now, of course, there was another advantage slash disadvantage we need to discuss in this rule, and that would be the amulet,
Oh, yes.
and more importantly, Austin's sandwich.
That damn sandwich.
Of all the twists and trinkets that Jeff Probst has thrown into the game, it turns out all he really needed to do was dangle a sandwich, and it would encourage the big moves that he so
Mm.
craved.
Mm-hmm.
Because Austin was never going to forgive or forget the fact that Jay specifically didn't want to let him have it. It is the
She stole
biggest,
his sandwich.
yes, it is the biggest revenge plot since John Wick.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's deep.
Hmm.
But how come there was no like aggression towards Kelly? I know Kelly initially was like,
Maybe
I'm
she's
thinking
next. I
sandwich.
mean, she might be next, but also I think it's because Kelly clearly could have gone either way.
Yeah, Kelly was initially like, I'm thinking sandwich. And then
But Jay was the one who was like, I want the amulet.
Which
and
is
was,
such a bad idea.
oh God, yes. And so,
Terrible.
yeah, she said in interviews in retrospect, it was obviously a mistake. And she didn't know how much it would come back to haunt her, which was appropriate the night after Halloween. It was the
Mm,
ghost of sandwiches lost. But she went in there after having lost the one person she thought could be a good ally in Sean. She knew that there was a, mergatory coming soon,
mhm.
and she was thinking this would encourage them to work together, which is the opposite of what it
Exact opposite of what
actually,
it did.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what it
Well,
will always do, you know.
yes. And I really do feel like this is something that future Survivor players really need to consider is that in a game like this, the whole goal is to vote people out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you want to be the last one standing, you want to be the winner. And so if you are in a situation where you think this is going to force us to have to work together when it's clearly written on the parchment that like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, when each one of you is voted out, that just makes the other one stronger. The like perhaps you should be like, you know what, never mind. Like, not going to do that because
Yeah.
I have no interest in these two individuals having more of a reason to want to vote me out, which is exactly what that amulet created.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, it's possible she was thinking that, especially with Austin having been an original tribe mate of hers, that he wouldn't, want to come after her that hard. Yeah, she was wrong,
Yeah,
because she took his sandwich. Um,
she
you know,
did take his
yeah.
sandwich.
Now, I think that, well, I know that we'll talk more about the impact of the amulet in terms of gameplay when we get to the second rule. But I will say, when I eventually meet Austin, I'm going to make sure I am not standing between him and his dinner.
Just buy him a sandwich. Do you know how
Yes,
many
yes.
sandwiches people are probably buying for this
Oh,
guy?
yeah, he probably has sandwiches for ages.
I love it. He
Um,
should be like the Subway spokesperson now
there
or
you go.
something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to use the name of the previous one, but then I remembered what happened to him.
It's
So
not a good idea.
no, we won't go there.
We'll avoid that.
Yeah. All right. Well, now we can move back to the first and most important rule, which is to scheme and plot. And Jay seemed to have a good understanding of the need to do this. We didn't see much from her original tribe, but she described in her interviews how she saw the two duos forming there and realized she needed to counter it. So she reached out to her partner in music, Sifu, and they made a pinky promise to work together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we'll talk about that more in the second rule, but suffice it to say, so much for the sanctity of pinky promises.
Yeah, it doesn't matter on Survivor.
No.
It's
And,
kind of like swearing on your children, your
yes,
wife.
exactly.
Like, doesn't mean
Exactly.
anything. It's Survivor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, beyond that, we saw Jay make an immediate alliance with Sean and even flip Dee and Julie to save him. So much for that. And then she said at Mergatory, she
Right?
made some connections with Jake and Emily. And so much for that.
Yeah. But this really frustrates me a lot. And I know that we've already talked about this, but I just want to mention it one more time. Sean, like, this is what happens
Mm-hmm.
when other people decide to quit. You take all of the work that has been done by someone else, and then you it's tossed
Yeah.
aside. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
anymore. And she was so excited to have Sean and did such a great job with that relationship. And then getting the other people
Mm-hmm.
on board, getting Dee, getting Julie, like, okay, we're going to do this. And then he's just like, you know what? Never mind. I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm going to go home. It's just, I feel for her. I really feel for her because, like, she was making inroads, she was forming
Mm-hmm.
relationships. But I do feel like it's almost as if she was, like, late to the party every time, right? Or it was
Yes.
like she would show up and it's like people had already picked their places to sit and then she had to kind of fit somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel like that was what kept happening with Jay. It was like people were already doing these things, already forming these relationships and bonds, and then she would be like, "Hey, what about me?" So and she just seemed to keep doing that. So that's why I was excited for her and Sean. But then Sean was like, I don't want to stay at this party either. I'm leaving. So I just feel for her in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so she kept trying to move through doing things. And along the way, she told us that she knew more than she showed that there were some issues within her tribe. Well, she
Mm,
told us in interviews. But she kept acting as if all was okay with them and saying things like, obviously, I know that my Reba tribe mates have my back. Maybe it
mm.
was like trying to will it into being, like if she said it enough times, it would come true.
It's
Um,
possible.
and then of course, after the shot hit, resulting in 0 votes, she sprang into action on the scheming front to try to save herself. She made a big push for Emily, not because she particularly wanted Emily gone, but that was the name she'd heard as a possible target, so it made the most
Right.
sense, which is smart. But the problem was that, like we often say, it's so hard to change minds at tribal council. That's why
Yes.
live tribal councils are so rare.
Yeah.
Even in this situation, Jay was always the second possibility. And a few
Mm-hmm.
minutes of heavy lobbying wasn't going to change that. Everybody said to her face, okay, we're good. And then they turned around and said, yeah, we're voting her out.
Yeah. And I do think that this speaks volumes of how Emily has been portraying herself and,
Mm-hmm.
and acting in front of everyone, because Emily wasn't the backup plan, even though it was like Lulu, these are the two Lulu people,
Right.
but Emily hadn't been labeled the backup plan. It was always J.Maya that she was going to be the backup plan. And clearly there was some issues that had been created previous, because we've heard J.Maya's name come up before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think it's impressive for Emily to have been able to kind of like maintain that level of gameplay, considering she's coming in as, two people from this tribe
Right.
and isn't the other option. Like, no one's going, well, you know what, if we don't get Kaleb, we'll get her. That didn't happen. So I
Yeah.
do agree that trying to change, it was good for her to try.
Right.
But yes, in that moment they had already been talking about J.Maya, and it is the safer play for everyone who's trying to scramble in that time frame. Well, that's the other name we've all been talking about, so
Right.
we'll go with J.Maya.
I mean,
Right.
yeah. I mean, it was, Emily had gotten in good with original Reba while Jay
Mhm.
was not in her
Right.
own original
Right.
tribe. Emily
Right.
was better set up in that tribe than Jay was.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, the second rule says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Jay had a few issues here, starting with the impression by her Reba tribe mates that she was some sort of supervillain just waiting to murder them in their sleep. I mean, I know when I first saw her, that was definitely the first thing that I thought of
Super
was
villain, 100%.
supervillain,
Yeah.
serial killer vibes. I mean, because that's the way they talked about her. I mean, the question everyone has is why they wanted her out so badly. Why were they so convinced Jay was going to cut them? Sifu
Mm.
literally said, well, I say literally. He's the one who said literally. Sifu said, I think she's literally trying to slither up and cut people's throats. Literally, Jessica.
Yeah,
Literally.
literally. That means, yeah, that's what is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
But
And then,
no, that's not actually
no,
what's going to happen.
no. And, Julie said something similar in the episode too. So where did it come from? I think it's from the Pinky Promise.
You
From
think so?
what from what she said in interviews, he immediately ran and told the rest of the tribe that she was out there wanting to go after them. And then Julie and Drew circled back and actually told Jay about it. I guess they still, at least on some level, believed Sifu. And it's interesting because on the one hand, he was creating so many problems on his own that D and Julie were willing to go along with Jay's plan to vote him out instead of Sean, but they still believed him when it came to Jay.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, a lot of this comes down to perception as well.
Yes.
When you look at the way that Jay was acting on the tribe and was carrying herself on the
Mm-hmm.
tribe, she was in a much different camp, if you will, than Sifu. Sifu was kind of just happy go lucky, or still
Mm-hmm.
is, and a lot of playing air guitar on the machete and things of that nature seems very non-threatening, right? Like, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's part of what maybe was being built up with J.Maya, is that there's there's something here. Like, she's the one who was looking at the tribe flag and with the writing and trying to like
Yes.
determine what that was. And if anyone else saw that, they might be like, boy, do you see what she's doing? Like, she's literally trying to figure out what is like what that message is just with her own mind.
Right.
So maybe she's incredibly smart. She was doing the puzzles. And so all of that can become very scary in the world of Survivor
Yeah, but
because
just being smart doesn't mean she's going to slither and cut your throat.
and I don't disagree with that at all. I
know.
think that is way too far. That's an extreme, and it shouldn't have gone to that extreme. So I don't know why it went to that extreme. And maybe that's just Sifu being Sifu. If you really want to create a narrative, I think the best way to do that sometimes is put fear into people. Like, oh, we can't trust her because she's doing this and she's doing that. And then that narrative takes on like its own life and people
Right.
kind of add to it. And so perhaps that was what Sifu was trying to do with this was I'm going to throw her under the bus. People will then focus on her and I will continue to pepper them with like things that she's doing.
Yeah.
And then it becomes the truth, even though it's not.
Yeah, especially if he knew he was also on the bottom with her,
Mm-hmm.
then what do? You try to elevate yourself one
Right.
above the bottom person.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and this whole thing continued. And what you said is perfect, a narrative, because then it just kept going from there. So Jay came up with this plan to take the blame for the Sifu vote so he wouldn't play his non existent title. Now, Jay clarified in her interviews that she never told Sifu that she voted for him. She just raised this possible plan to Julie and Dee in case they went back to tribal council. I do wonder if it sparked the idea that the other two had to blame Jay for the Sifu vote, or if they were already thinking of it anyway. But either way, Sifu believed it was her. And that, of course, helped lead to him having a Gabler moment and throwing her name out at the merge feast.
Yes. Oh, and it was immediate.
Yes. He's like, we should start talking about Jay.
That's it,
Yeah.
Jay.
Now, there were other issues that contributed to this idea that Jay was over scheming, one of which comes back to the amulet. Because while the three of them who had gotten it came up with a very good lie about what they had to do and how they failed to get anything, it wasn't kept as secret as Jay and Kelly thought. Because Austin told Drew right away. And then at the mergatory, both of them ran right over and told Julie and Dee. So here we are. Julie and Dee have heard from Jay this whole story about how they didn't get anything. And then boom, Austin and Drew come in and say, yeah, they did. Yeah, she lied.
Yeah. But it's interesting though, because Austin is just like, yeah, I mean, I might have lied too, but it's okay.
But he didn't lie to Dee and Julie.
True. It was to the people that he went back to.
Right. And then he still told Drew, separately. Right. So, yeah. And he told Emily. So really the only person still in the game that he lied to was Kendra.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah.
And as long as Kendra doesn't know about it, then she doesn't even know he lied.
Yeah.
Then there was another instance that happened in front of everyone at that prior challenge, because before going on the journey, yes, I think we may have talked about this. Jay was acting as the spokesperson for Reba as they chose Austin to go as well. And when Jeff asked why, Jay said it was because she wanted to get information from him. And, this put Austin into a bad position and revealed to everyone in the game that Jay had, kind of a devious personality. Yeah. And I mean, it was an open devious, but it was still, and certainly when combined with what people on her own original tribe were saying, like you said, it fit the narrative. And that's the perfect term for it, and again, just because Jeff asks you a question doesn't mean you have to answer truthfully.
Oh, lie. Yes. Lie to that man. It's okay. Don't say anything to him. He'll get frustrated. It's fine.
Well, that's the thing, because I put that on Twitter and Ron Clark responded on Twitter and said, oh, yes, you do have to answer Jeff. And I said, you have to answer him, but you don't have to be honest about it.
Right. And I feel like there's this truth serum that like Jeff maybe it's his cologne. I don't know. It's something that just comes off of, it's something. They wash his clothes and this stuff, and then you smell it and you're like, oh my God, I'll tell you everything. And that was honestly one of the things that I said to Jeff when I first met him. I'm like, why does everybody feel the need to be so damn honest with you? And he was like, what? I'm like, they come to tribal council and all of a sudden they're like, let me tell you what's really going on. I'm like, that I am not going to do. And he was fascinated by this, but it's like, there is no reason for you to be honest with Jeff. Yes, answer his question, tell him something. Be like, hey, I hope Austin gets a sandwich and so does everybody else. I don't know, some, like whatever. But like this idea that you need to tell Jeff exactly what's going on in your mind. And I get it. You're hungry. You're not firing on all the correct cylinders, but you can lie to that man. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And especially when you're lying to him in front of literally everyone in the game.
Right. Make it a good lie.
Yeah. 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 I mean, she could have said something as simple as, I know him from my original tribe and I just want to see how he's doing. He looks like he could use some, some help or something, anything.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that you can, I mean, and I know that she and whoever, I don't know if it was D, they did rock, paper, scissors.
Mm-hmm.
They,
I think it was D. I think it was D.
Yeah. For whoever was going to go.
Right.
And it could have been, well, we, did rock, paper, scissors for that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a random thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting because on the Traders podcasts, the Traders Canada podcast that I've been doing, I've recently been discussing how once a person's name is mentioned, others will then immediately look at every little thing they've done to support the idea that they're a trader.
Yes.
So as soon as someone's name is mentioned, they'll be like, you know what? They had orange juice at breakfast. They never have orange juice.
Right. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I think the same thing is true here. Once Jay's name was mentioned, every little meaningless thing she did, they ascribed to some big conspiracy plan.
Mm-hmm.
The amulet, the lie, Sifu's claim, what she said at
the
challenge.
Sandwich, come on.
All of those contributed. And then I'm sure they found other things along the way that weren't real even.
Yeah. Well, and this is why I will say that there is something to be said about creating someone's narrative for them. And if you are able to do that, you are an incredible Survivor player because you can literally destroy someone's game just by planting these seeds of different things, because then that's what people will do. They are already in a paranoid state. They are not thinking as clearly. You worry about everything you see, every conversation that's happening you're not involved in, everything. And I think one of the things that she actually talked about, and this was a paranoia that she was even suffering from, and this is J.Maya, is that she didn't believe Sifu wasn't going to bury an idol, and she went and basically dug up his own poop because she thought he was burying an idol. She told Rob that,
I know.
So it's like,
I know. So Rob's like, oh no, tell me you didn't. Tell me.
So this is where your head is at when you're playing that game. And so any little bit of information that you can throw in there to make someone's head spin a little bit, go for it. If you're able to pull it off, absolutely. And I really, truly think that that's what Sifu started that ball rolling, and then it just kept getting bigger. And then it was all about J.Maya and everything that people could say about her, they did.
Yeah. All right, well, we can move to the third rule, which tells players to be flexible. What are your thoughts on how Jay did for this rule?
I think she really wanted to be flexible and was trying to be flexible. I mean, we already kind of talked about how it was almost like she was late to the party sometimes, trying to form those relationships, but she was always willing to consider her options. We saw what happened with Sean. She wanted to form that bond. She was very excited. She was willing to take that chance, make that move. And then she was also willing to talk to her other Reba tribe mates and go, hey, listen, this is what I think we need to do instead of keeping Sifu. So I think overall she was very interested in being flexible, and she did a nice job trying to do it. But I think she was constantly kind of hitting that wall because she was always looking for someone to play with, I think is how she kind of described it in the interviews. And it's unfortunate that she just wasn't able to do that. And so I think because she had that desire, it made her willingness to be flexible all the more necessary, but also out there. I'm going to go on this journey. I want to play with these people. This is what we're going to do. Forget about the sandwich. We were going to get these amulets. We're going to take over, and I just feel like she was really in that mindset of wanting to play a really great game with anyone that was willing to play with her.
Yeah, and that's why I would say she had pluses and minuses. Pluses for the things that you mentioned. She wanted to work with Sean. She saw that Sifu was a problem. She tried to find allies at the Mergatory. The minus was the last thing you mentioned, which was
Mm-hmm.
getting the amulet rather than
Right.
reading the room. See
Yes.
that, I mean, she gave Austin credit for hiding it. But Austin didn't immediately say yes, which should have been an awful big hint to her that the
Right.
answer was no.
I want the sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, when your husband asks you if you want to go to a specific restaurant and you're like, well, hmm, he doesn't immediately assume that means yes.
Right.
He
Exactly.
if he's smart, he assumes that means yeah, she really doesn't want to, but she's trying to decide if she's just going to go along with it.
Right. She's willing
Yeah,
to consider, but
yeah,
not real excited about it. Yeah.
yeah. Again, read the room,
Yeah.
and yeah, Austin did not want to do that, and that was the other thing is just read the situation. Look at the situation. Look at how bad these amulets are. Forget
Yeah.
about the personalities. Just look at how bad the amulets are.
They look like those things that you made in like grade school. Do you remember the like keychains? That's what they reminded me of.
No, but if you ever want to see a really bad something that looks like that, look at Survivor UK's immunity idol.
Oh, really?
It's like kindergarten art. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
That's amazing.
Um, all right. Well, for the fourth rule, it tells players not to let their emotions control them. And I hate to keep referencing the amulet, but I really feel like that was more of an emotional decision than it was a strategic one. I mean, you know, we talked about earlier that she went on this journey just after having lost Sean. And I think that affected her mentality when assessing how she should handle the situation. Yes, there were obviously strategic considerations. I just think if she had been more objective in that moment, again, she would have realized that was adding a problem, not creating a solution.
Yeah, and she seemed to indicate that in her interviews as well,
Mm-hmm.
that she's reconsidering that decision and realizing it was the wrong one. And I do think that this is one of those situations where Survivor is hoping that they can play up on the emotional
Mm-hmm.
component of the game because one, you're playing Survivor, so you're
Yeah.
excited about that. And then two, here's this opportunity to go on this journey. And it's like, wow, I want to have all of those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what you end up doing. And you're not looking at it as necessarily from a game perspective, but more of like, I want to experience everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wanted that moment without really reading the fine print. And it's in, and those are those times you need to really check yourself when you're in this game because you have to weigh your options. And it can't just be about, I want to have an
Mm-hmm.
amulet because I want to have something and I want to have this power that is actually going to hurt you more than it's going to help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Now, beyond the amulet, I can't think of any other specifically emotional decisions that she made. Can you?
Yeah, no, I think overall she was very, I mean, considering she went through all that with
Mm-hmm.
Sifu, she seemed to keep herself very calm throughout that entire process. And it didn't feel like a Bruce
Yes.
situation like we had, where
Yeah.
it was like now it's like butting heads. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like that at all.
Yeah, and that actually takes us nicely to the fifth rule, which reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Because, yeah, she even talked in her interviews about getting along with Sifu, even as he was trying to target her.
Right.
And it seems to me like the same was all around. Nobody wanted her out for social reasons. But
Yeah.
what did you think?
No, I think that she is someone who probably, I mean, she's listening to her in her interviews, she's so enjoyable. And I'm assuming that that was the same way that she presented herself
Mm-hmm.
on the island. And so I think she didn't have to pretend to be nice. I do think that that was something that was she's just naturally good at. But I do think that there was a level of I want to say sophistication to it maybe because she was trying to also play this, game of
Mm-hmm.
Survivor and people were perceiving her in a particular way. So I do think that she was certainly very social, but it might have been being read into a little bit too
Yes.
much by some of the players.
Oh, look at how nice she's being. She's probably getting ready to stab you in the back. Because that's just who she is.
That's
We
what she
know.
does.
Yes.
Don't sleep too close to
Yeah.
her. Yeah.
All right. Well, the sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. And as we discussed earlier, it seemed like Jay's Reba tribe mates believed she was a threat to them with the very colorful language that we've been making fun of. And, you know, but we also discussed how most of that was fabricated out of whole cloth, seemingly from a
Mm-hmm.
combination of what Sifu said and maybe their own minds. And so, sure, she was a threat to Sifu, but not to the other four and not to pretty much anyone else in the game.
Well, didn't Caleb say that she was like the most strategic threat or something? Didn't he refer to her in some fashion during the tribal council
Oh,
about
during the, I
being?
mean, he might have, but he
Yeah.
was, I mean, it seemed to be mostly that he was talking about the three Reba women as a whole.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see
Being
that.
that way, being a block, which is why D was not happy with him. Um,
Yes, because D's like, "Hi, you just threw my name out too."
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
time out. Like, what is going on?
Although he pointed out, he was like, "Well, in fairness, you already said you were voting for me." And she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah,
That's true. Never
yeah,
mind. Moving on.
okay, I
No, and
guess."
I do think that she was, and that's an interesting little side note. I never even really considered that there was that Reba 3, I guess, with
Hmm.
the, where he was trying to build that up as a potential threat.
Right.
And again, this is that sprinkling that narrative, creating that narrative
Hmm.
for people to be like, "Well, did you think about this? Because it could be a thing." So there might have been some play there,
Hmm.
something that they could have worked with and people could have considered. But yeah, I mean, I think she was a threat to Sifu, and then Sifu was creating this narrative regarding her. But then also in looking at where she was positioned, the amount of Reba players, and people are all worried about the numbers and who has the most,
Hmm.
and what we have heard so much about this mergatory moment is whoever comes in with the numbers really ends up kind of controlling the game, and she's part of that Reba number. And
Hmm.
so I think there's a lot of things kind of working against her just because of the people that she's been surrounded by, not necessarily just herself.
Yeah, yeah, and then on top of it, she posed a threat a bit in terms of the amulet. I think
Mm-hmm.
if other factors hadn't been in play, it might have made sense for her and Austin to work together, either with Kelly or to oust Kelly so that they could have the extra vote to use between them. But instead,
Right.
the fact that she was one of the three with the amulet made her more threatening to Austin, which only piled on top of everything else, like adding extra meat or cheese to a sandwich.
Ah, there's that sandwich.
All right, well, we can move to Appendix A, which is about the tribe keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. At this point in the game, at the Mergatory, players can go in a lot of different ways. In this case, they chose to target the strong threat in Caleb.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense for a number of reasons, not least of which is if he's friends with so many people, who can be sure who he's really with other than Emily? Um,
Mm-hmm.
But when that didn't work, they went with Jay, who is by no means the same level threat or type of player as Caleb. So,
Right.
looking at it from the outside, it may seem strange. Like, how did you get from Caleb to Jay? Uh, you know, but when players are discussing who to vote out, it's not like a straightforward ranking system. Jay
Right.
was under discussion for certain reasons. Caleb was
Mm-hmm.
under discussion for certain reasons. The reasons for voting out Caleb won. They won the day. Everybody
Right.
jumped on board. Literally, everyone jumped on board.
Literally. And that
Once,
is literally
yes,
okay.
yes. Once that was stopped, they just reverted to the next person because there really wasn't time to have a full blown strategic discussion about, okay, what does it mean now that Caleb is still there?
Right. And that's where it comes back to the like common enemy idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if there are two people being discussed and the first one is no longer an option, well, then the second one becomes the option, right? I
Right.
mean, and that's just when you are in that moment, you're in that group. At that point, what becomes necessary is how many people are going to put her name down. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter the reasons for it. It's just how many people are agreeing to that in that particular moment.
Right. Yeah, and that was also everybody. Um,
Right.
yeah, there's also the fact that most of the players wouldn't want to target so let's say they were looking for someone similar to Caleb. They're like, okay, we couldn't get Caleb. Let's get a strong physical and social threat. Oh, wait. All those people are either my allies or me.
Right.
So
Right.
they weren't going to, you know, jump on board. Dee's not going to sit there and go, yeah, let's get Austin out, and
Right.
all those different things. So it's like, oh yeah, other than Kaleb, I guess nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, no, that's not the time to start throwing names. Kaleb was throwing names, but
Yes.
no one else needs to be doing that.
Yes. All right. Well, it is about time to wrap things up. So, what are your final thoughts on Jay?
I was pleasantly surprised with Jay. I must say that coming into pregame, I had some concerns with how she was going to fit in. And unfortunately, she did struggle with that. I mean, she talked about that a lot with just trying to find people to
Mm-hmm.
play the game with. And she felt like she was always searching. But she really did do a good job trying to make those inroads and try to make the connections that were necessary. And I think that she positioned herself in a really good place. But unfortunately for her, I think it really boils down to the people she was playing the game with. Sometimes there are things that are just outside of your control. And she ended up on a tribe with Sifu. And then she ended up on a swap tribe with
Sifu
Sifu.
is outside of everyone's control.
Right. And so it's just one of those things that you can come into Survivor with every plan possible. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
that, and I'm going to do this. And she sounded like she had all of these ideas and plans pregame that she wanted to implement. And then here was Sifu. And Sifu had different plans. And Sifu didn't want to play with J.Maya for whatever reason and
Mm-hmm.
wanted to throw her immediately under the bus. And so I think for her, a swap would have been really great without Sifu because she could have had a moment, an
Yes.
opportunity to kind of get away from that narrative, kind of create her own, almost like we saw that happen with Emily, right? Because
Right.
all of a sudden Emily gets swapped and Emily now gets to kind of recreate her story because everyone had this idea of how
Mm-hmm.
Emily was. And then they met her and they're like, oh, no, she's really quite pleasant and fun to be around and enjoyable, not like what we thought, what we perceived. And I don't think J.Maya ever
What she
got that
was
chance.
until she changed. Yes.
Right. But that's,
Yes.
and she
Yes.
got that because she had been
Yes.
told to do that.
Right.
But J.Maya never had that chance.
Mm-hmm.
J.Maya never had a chance to rewrite her story because her story continued to be with Sifu. There was
Right.
always a little asterisk, like everything about J.Maya, here comes Sifu. It was
Yeah.
like it wasn't going away. And so I just think for her, unfortunately, she hit so many roadblocks along the way because you have Sifu, you have Sean who quits, you have the amulet, which is a terrible idea, and that damn sandwich, and then you've got the shot in the dark. So this poor J.Maya is like hitting every roadblock possible, some of which is of her own creation. I'm not saying that it's not, but unfortunately, in the game of Survivor, there are things that you cannot expect, things you
Mm-hmm.
cannot plan for. You can try to plan for them, but unfortunately, seafoods and sandwiches and shots in the dark, you can't always plan for those things.
No. No. Yeah, there was an 83.333% chance that this would be the Why Kaleb Lost podcast. But luck was on his side and definitely not on Jay's in that regard. However, Jay didn't end up being voted out just because of luck. She'd been on the bottom of her original tribe for almost the whole game and was seemingly lucky herself that they didn't go to tribal council. And once Mergatory hit, they eagerly threw out her name. This was a culmination of smaller factors, both real and imagined. Each small item added onto the pile, added to the narrative. Sifu ratted out her alliance attempt and apparently embellished it. She openly talked about gathering information from another tribe. She got the amulet and then lied to Julie and Dee about it. And she took Austin's sandwich.
Damn sandwich.
Maybe none of those things alone would have been enough to target her, except, the sandwich. But all of them together almost were, especially when people were looking for an easy target. Now, almost will usually save you for at least one more vote.
Mm-hmm.
And it did. It's just that the next vote came like 3 minutes after, and she had no time to change minds. Her name was already out there. From what we saw, Jay wasn't really playing too hard or over scheming, but what she was actually doing doesn't matter nearly as much as what people believed. We say it all the time here. Perception is reality. She and other people changed the perception that they had of her until she became the boogeyman under the bed. Not quite as bad as the monster in the closet, but once the closet door got locked, it was time to deal with the scary nightmare that was Jay, at least as she was portrayed by some. And that is why Jay lost.
She's the boogeyman under the bed.
She is. She is. Very scary.
Well, there we are. Very
Yes.
scary. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. She's so scary.
Yes.
All 105 pounds of her.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure each of those sandbags weighed more than she did. So,
Oh, I know. I got stuck in the
oh, in the net?
the rope. Yeah, in
Yeah.
the net. In that, yes. I
Yeah.
was like, that's awful. Is someone gonna get her hair out?
Yeah.
Like, is anyone gonna help?
Nope.
It's terrible. Nope.
Nope.
Just
She'll
let her
just,
suffer.
yeah. All right. Well, before we go to our predictions, I do want to remind everyone that you can get the rules we just discussed as a poster at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, or also as a t-shirt, or
Mhm.
as a t-shirt checklist. So again, robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed.
You know, the holidays are coming up. Just saying.
They are. They
I'm
are.
looking for some ideas for the
We have
holidays.
a big pre-Black Friday sale. Exactly the same price as it was last week and the week
Exactly.
before. You know.
Get on that.
Yeah. But also before we go into our predictions here, if you ever want to reach out to us, Jessica could tell you how.
Oh, you can certainly find me at Jessica Lewis 89 on Twitter. And I am also on Instagram, Jessica Lewis 6789. I'm more active on Twitter than I am on Instagram. I haven't been as active. Things have been a little bit hectic for myself. However, the gentleman who is sitting to what appears to be I'm going to say left,
Right.
but everything is
It's
flipped.
right.
So
Yeah, I
it's
think
right. So it's like everything is flipped
yeah.
around.
Okay.
It's right. My
Yeah.
right, even though it feels like it should be my left, happens to have some social media clout at this point, I'm going to say. And he has spread his wealth about the social media world and has so many places to be found. It's almost scary that he has a link tree so you can find all of those locations.
Yeah, I don't know
So
that
here it
wealth.
is.
I don't know that wealth is the right term for it, but yes.
Look at all of the places you are.
Yes.
I'm just going to start
you
calling you a Kardashian.
I mean, do I get Kardashian money for it then?
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Oh yeah. But in the meantime, you can find my link tree at linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE. Or you could find me on most text-based social media like Twitter and Blue Sky is at David Bloomberg. And on the video platforms, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram is at David Bloomberg TV, which is also for Threads since it's connected to Instagram. I've been posting 3 or 4 videos per day at TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Stuff obviously from Survivor, from Big Brother, although that's trailing off, of course. And shows like The Traders Canada and House of Villain and Survivor UK. So now, speaking of these different shows, I am doing still double duty Y Blank Lost podcasting for this week and one more. And so soon after this podcast is released, my Y Blank Lost for Big Brother 25 with Ovi Kabir will be out as well. Kind of a sad one. No spoilers, but come on. Everybody knows by now.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, I'm recapping the Traders Canada at the Tradar podcast, spelled TRAIDAR, which you could find on your usual podcast host or as audio on YouTube. And I'm also over there doing a special series on Survivor UK with a co-host who lives in the UK and has never seen Survivor before. So we're exchanging these different things. Like in the first episode, it was really fun because it's like he didn't know how all these different things worked. And he even was like, okay, so why are you saying it was a bad idea for this tribe to taunt the other tribe? Well, because they're going to be together at some point in a merge or possibly a swap. And he's like, oh, okay, so they come together. And so, he's heard a few things, but he really doesn't know, and he's learning it. But it's funny because there are some things he knows from having podcasted various seasons of The Traders with me. And so when one person was like, well, I'm doing it for honesty and loyalty. And he was like, oh, David's going to hate that. So, I'm spreading that view far and wide.
Look at you educating the masses.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. So, all right. Well, it is time now for predictions.
Mm.
From the preview, it looks like a split tribal council with two people going. And as much as I want to say that Kaleb will reconnect with people after almost all of them celebrated his shot in the dark success, I don't see it happening.
No,
Bruce,
I agree with you.
Bruce is strongly against him. Dee is not happy with him.
Yeah.
And so the odds are that he won't find a friendly audience in his half of the split group.
And he's also, again, the common enemy theme, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we go back to that, like, we've already all agreed that Kaleb has to go home. We
Right.
don't need to revisit the reasons why, because we've already all agreed that they
Right.
exist. It's not going to get any better. And now his story has elevated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now he can sit in that final three and be like, and look at me. I
Right.
should have gone home here. And that shot in the dark saved me, and I managed to make it this far. I was targeted. He has a great story. 100% he's going to be targeted again.
Yeah, I mean, I have to think he's almost certainly one of the targets, unless someone in that group does something really bad, or it's some sort of weird lopsided split, like him, Keturah, Emily, Kelly, and Bruce. And that Bruce somehow feels safe about it, and doesn't play his idol while they all turn on him, which the odds seem very low for all of that.
I feel like at this point, Bruce is making it to the final three. I really do.
I don't know.
I really feel like that's what this narrative is building up for.
The only other thing I could think of is if it's like he's on a majority Reba with one person from the other tribe, or a majority other tribe, one person from Reba, and they all are like, we could deal with Kaleb later. We can knock off this person from the opposing tribe right now.
Yeah, well, and I'm curious about that because we see that happen a lot, and I'm wondering if this group of individuals will be like, there's always that one player, like, we can get to him later, and then he makes it to the end. So I don't know if they're going to repeat history. I feel like this is a group of players that are not interested in repeating history. They seem to be very up on a lot of like the survivor components. And I just feel like they're going to look at Kaleb and be like, nope, we're not going to let that happen, because we have seen that so many times. So many times.
Yeah. Yeah. I still think it's most likely him, but I'm just trying to think of ways it wouldn't be him. But
I know, because he's great. Like, I would love to see him keep playing.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is truly a gifted survivor player.
Yeah.
For reasons, I mean, I can't imagine why.
Yeah. But for the second person, it could be literally anyone.
Yes.
Sifu seems to be the least protected, so in a split tribe situation, that could be all it takes. So as a somewhat random guess, I'm going with him.
And I think that's an interesting guess. I will say, I would like to remind you and everyone who listened maybe last week that my initial thought was J.Maya, and then you convinced me to go with Bruce. Do you remember
I didn't convince you of anything. You convinced
did.
yourself. No,
you were very convincing. And I was like, I was thinking J.Maya, but then you said all these things.
You are responsible for your own decisions.
That's fair. So maybe I had some butterfly effect on J.Maya going home because I didn't pick her and then she went home.
There you go. Yes. Yes,
I'm just gonna come up with all of these creative things.
Yes.
But this is what my thought is. If two people need to go home, I feel like I agree with Kaleb. I think that they're still going to be focusing on Kaleb. But I'm leaning very heavily towards Keturah. And I say that just because there's this thing that's still existing, and we saw all of that information, or with the idol hunt and keeping her out of the loop. And there's been a lot of talk about Keturah going off by herself, and we don't know what she's doing. And there's this butting heads with Bruce, but now they know Bruce has an idol. So I just feel like Keturah is the other potential option here. as someone who has been a little bit on the outs. And it seemed to become much more clear in this last episode that she was more on the outs than I thought. I thought she was closer to the people that she's been playing with. So I'm going to go with her and Kaleb.
Okay. And it could be a situation, because the interesting thing was the quote we got from Bruce when he found the idol was, I'm excited, or I want to blow someone's game up with this. It wasn't, I want to save myself. It was, I want to blow someone's game up.
This is why I feel like there's something here that is happening. And I just feel like there's too much buildup between Bruce and Katora that there isn't going to be something that happens between those two.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Rob is still doing tons of different special podcasts for everyone. And of course, beyond that, there's the Facebook group and Discord, and, help with finding international shows like Survivor UK or Traders Canada, or, Amazing Race Australia, just all sorts of stuff. You can support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Also, make sure you're subscribed to all of the reality TV RHAP-Ups podcasts by going to robhasawebsite.com/RHAP-Ups feed and selecting your podcast service of choice. You'll get all of the great Survivor non-Rob shows like the B&B and Survivor International, plus, of course, all the just a whole bunch of other shows too that that are coming up, like Amazing Race and RHAP coverage of the shows that I mentioned. So just everything is in there again at robhasawebsite.com/RHAP-Ups feed.
And we should thank everyone at RHAP-Ups for all of the incredible work that they do. Scott St. Pierre, thank you for all of the editing and all of the help that you do receive in that regard, not just on Why Blank Lost, but all of the content that David Bloomberg was just addressing and speaking to, especially ours, but all of the other ones matter too. So thank you for all of the incredible work that you do. There is so much content that is being provided. It's almost impossible. And I will say it seems impossible to listen to all of it. So thank you to all of the listeners that attempt to get through all of it, because we know that you're dedicated and we know that you love what you are listening to, because you keep coming back. So thank you for that. And David Bloomberg, thank you for convincing me last week to pick Bruce and change my choice from J.Maya. And then I couldn't sit here and say I was right and you were wrong, because I believed you.
It was all a secret part of my plan. Yes,
it really was. You're
so convincing.
You are the boogeyman under the bed.
I'm going to slither up and slit your throat. Just like J.Maya. Me and J.Maya.
Watch out, everyone. Here comes David Bloomberg and J.Maya.
That's right. We are the boogeymen. Yes. Well, thank you, Jessica, for another great episode. We will be back here next week. And of course, I will be in various different places before then. So hopefully people will, watch or listen to the Big Brother one and then go from there. And so, but if nothing else, we'll see you back here in a week. Bye.
Bye.